T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey friends, welcome to the Launch Sequence podcast. I've brought you back. Mr. Space Tomato is here to talk to you about space stuff, specifically Star Citizen. I bet you wouldn't have guessed. And the most exciting thing in Spar Citizen, we're going to stick with that. Spar Citizen's got spaceships, folks, and there's a lot of them coming over the next 2 months. So I brought in one of the masters of the class, one of the master classes of the ships, Starjump Grim. Dude, you can't grimace at that. You literally make the thing that people use to look at the spaceships themselves. Thank you for joining me today.
I appreciate it. There's an obsession there. Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. It's always fun to talk spaceships with you. And we are in as I said the other day on some chat, I said this is the season of ships. We're in that CitizenCon IAE period of the year. So yeah, it's a fun time.
Yeah, it's literally just October, and then November is like, we're between CitizenCon and the 1st of January. From everything that I'm hearing, we should have gotten about 9 ships, which is like almost as many ships as you would get in a normal year back in like 2016 kind of period. It's crazy, man. It's a lot. We're gonna talk about all of them. Well, we're gonna talk about the ones we know about, and maybe a little bit about the ones we don't. But first, I'd like to give you a chance to introduce yourself, because I did say, like, you make the thing people use to look at their spaceships, which can be a weird thing to say. Could you talk to people a little bit more about what you do in the community and the content you make?
Sure. So obviously do have a YouTube channel that I do a lot of streaming on, Starjump_Graham. Same name on Twitch. I stream, I kind of dual stream to both of those. So just Starjump_Graham. Been pretty active there, staying pretty regular, thanks to my wife being cool with that. So doing about 2 times a week, which is a lot of fun. And then on the tool side of things, we have Starjump Fleet Viewer, which you can go to starjumpfleetviewer.com. You can access there. It's a way to sort of visualize your fleets. It's tied into another site of ours, hangar.link, which is kind of our hangar compendium, which allows you to see everything you own, break it down by category. That information can transfer over into Fleet Viewer. We are looking at ways to change Fleet Viewer in pretty big ways. HangarLink as well. We're in active discussions on that, and so sort of think like Fleet Viewer HangarLink version 2. Who knows? We may even change the name, but it's going to be a bigger thing. We obviously want to support base building with it. That is an active topic of discussion. We want to be able to for people to in orgs to be able to plan their bases out within the platform and sort of figure out where buildings are going to go and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of big plans there, and it's like I said, ship season. So I am streaming a lot more than usual, talking about ships. We are giving away a Perseus right now. I'm giving away a Perseus, so stay tuned.
Jeez.
Yeah, just announced that the other day. That is running on. If you're any of my channels or on the YouTube, you'll find the link for that. That's a Gleam link. It's free to enter. But giving away a Perseus, I know that's probably one of the ships we'll talk about.
Definitely.
But yeah, things have been good.
Busy. Good, dude. Yeah, it's definitely a busy time. I mean, even the Astro Historian on here, often you've been on the Captain's Table, I'm sure. He even says, he's like, yeah, the year has begun for CIG. October, September is like the beginning of their year, and it's really where all the big stuff happens. And we were talking before the podcast about like a lot of patches they've done this year. They've obviously been wanting to drop a ship every month. They have exploded in terms of funding. This is going to be their best year ever. They're still about 40% ahead of last year. And approaching, sorry, just updating that list real quick. It's looking like they'll probably pass their 2022 numbers, and possibly, it's looking like they're probably going to pass their 2023 and 2024 numbers this year or this month.
Yeah.
I agree. They set a goal. We don't know what it is, but
they're doing something right.
I'm hoping they surpassed it, because they went a little wild this year, and they're probably going to slow things down next year. Do you think people are getting some ship fatigue from the speed at which they've been dropping what mostly has been variants of some sort this year?
Ship fatigue. So based off what I've heard from my community and just the larger community, I think people have gotten are excited for the monthly ship releases, something new coming,
Hmm.
even if it is a variant, just because there's a more regular release of ships. Um, what I do think is that CIG has to continue to manage that balance between three sort of things when it comes to ships: new ships to keep excitement going, the backlog, and variants, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think all three of those are good things that we need to have. Uh, but it's the balance of those things, right? If they lean too much into variants, that's a problem, and we've gotten, I think, close to that this year. But when you do go back and sort of re-look at what was released, it is a healthier mix than what you might initially think. But I think partially the reason that so many people are understanding about the variants this year, some are upset about, but the reason that there's still some understanding and some grace being given on the number of variants this year is because CIG's been pretty open about the big backlog ships that are in active development, and I think that does make people kind of go, oh, okay, well now I understand why we're getting the Fortune or we're getting the Meteor. Um, and when you take a look at that, it's and just what was it last week? They talked about the Liberator going in pre-production, but Liberator, Kraken, Ironclads, Perseus is being worked on, Pioneer is being worked on. They've even go so far as to say, and this is not started yet, so no one get too excited, but they've gone on to say that possibly the Merchantman will roll back into production into next or back into
Oh
next year.
God, don't even
So
start.
I know. So, but and here's the thing, and they got to be careful saying stuff like that because that stuff where they talk about those backlog ships and like going into production on those, I feel like those are the ships that give them the grace for us to deal with like variants or overpriced ships, that come out
Yeah.
throughout the year.
Yeah. I
So
think it's also
that's how I feel about it. That the variance issue.
that do you think that the lack of concept ships helps too?
Yeah, I do. I think concepts were wearing I think the concepts are problematic, but the only reason I think the concepts are problematic is because the concept period was so long. I actually think people would be okay with concept ships, and I'm okay with them too, if the concepts were always kind of limited. Like if they announced a concept ship, then it would be kind of only in that period for a year to 2 years max, and then it's going into production, sort of thing. The issue I think is concept ships that are 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. You know what I mean? It's like, oh my gosh, like the Kraken is great that it's in active production, but it's been in concept for 7 years. You know what I mean? That's a long time. And there's ships even worse than that. The Endeavor, Starliner, Crucible, Orion. But so I will say this though. I think the lack of concept ships puts us in a little bit of a weird place where CIG isn't able to take a year's worth of community discussion on that ship into account, which is what happened with concept ships. Now, again, we don't need 8 years of discussion, but sometimes a year of discussion could go nice. So I was a little concerned about that. And I've been pretty vocal on that and like, oh man, CIG really doesn't respond to players' discussion or even creators' discussion about ships. Um, the post that the QA developer made the other day, though, slightly alleviated my fears, though. I don't know if you saw that post, but a QA dev made a post about how the Perseus was tested, and the testing for the
Oh yeah.
Perseus was done differently than ships in the past. That was a little shocking. I was shocked that ships were not tested thoroughly before. But if CIG is going to start testing ships in that way moving forward, then it makes me a little bit feeling a little bit better that ships aren't going to be in concept for a while for us to discuss and hash out issues with. But
Right. Right.
um, ultimately, I think no concept ships is a good thing for the game.
With
Yeah,
the concept ships, I think it was a lot easier for them. I know obviously they have their restraints and they're
yeah,
being very particular about what models make it through. I'm sure every concept we see, there are dozens of ship possibilities, but I do
yeah,
think removing them probably helped avoid getting too much bloat because it's just easier to release a picture of a ship and make some sales
Yeah.
than it is to come up with the mechanics and actually make it work. And kind of
Yeah.
seeing some of the consequences of that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think this is changing the ship team's approach all that much. All the ships still have to go through all the steps that they have been going through there. They go through the concept team, concepts get drawn up, a concept is chosen, and progressed into development. The only thing now is that the gap between a ship going into development from concept um, is probably shorter for the most part, but not always
Yeah.
because there's probably ships that are going flight. There could be ships that are going flight ready at IAE that maybe were concepted 3 years ago. We don't know. They could have been concepted 3 years ago, paused internally, and then just picked up
Yeah.
8 months ago, worked on for release. So I don't, from an internal standpoint, I don't see much change. Um, but I think that it'll allow CIG to plow through that backlog, get some of those bigger ships out. Not all of them, but some of them. Some of them are going to stay on the backlog, I think, to 1.0, and there's probably a good reason for that. But it allows them to clear off the backlog as much as possible, and again, just puts them in a better place to pace themselves and the type of work they're doing throughout the year. So without having to worry about a huge backlog, when the new year starts and they do that first of year planning meeting, they can go, okay, we've got this big ship we're making, these two large ships, and these seven small ships. You know what I mean? They can better plan out what they have to make because it'll all be new stuff
Yeah.
essentially with
Yeah.
no backlog considerations.
And kind of a lot like the features and some of like locations that they're starting to build faster. They're starting to be able to like say release contracts faster because they have some of the existing contracts and they mix it up and they put it in. We
Yeah.
are going to, I think, start to see a lot more benefit from how many of the ships they've created. I know they've been making ships for a
Yeah.
long time, but it really does feel like in the last few years they have figured out a lot better how to benefit from the work that they've done. The
Hmm.
idea that building the Polaris will help them with the Perseus or building the Ironclad will help them with the Kraken. It feels like because
Yeah.
they're getting to larger ships, that's going to become a lot more apparent uh, fairly soon.
Yeah. Yeah. And, on the for those of us that root through the files, and do the data mining and stuff, it is very, very clear that CIG has been pushing hard into the ship kits, the manufacturer kits. This is something almost in every patch, even though a lot of data miners don't really report on it. Almost every single patch, pretty major ship kit additions are being added to the game files. For example, Drake's is really filled out. We've seen ship kits for MISC,
Can
RSI,
you explain more what you
and
mean
others.
by ship kits?
So yeah, the ship kits. I guess the best way to think of those are a big box of Legos for that manufacturer, and those Legos will have um, I think sometimes texture work already done on them and some lighting stuff, but a lot of times it's all just the geometry. And the geometry is like, I would call it at like final art quality. And it consists of common areas. So it can consist of parts and pieces such as like a floor panel, a wall panel, a relay box, a door control panel, seats. Seats are another good one. Um, just all those parts and pieces that
Okay,
could
I
be
see.
common across that manufacturer. And then
It's like
on top of that,
the final art kind of stuff when they're doing the ship pipeline.
yeah, and then on top of that, it has groupings of that stuff. So, take a wall panel, a floor panel, a railing, a junction box, whatever the case may be, and then it combines those into, let's say, a corridor section, right? Or or something like that that you can, or for example, another one is a staircase, right? So in in the Drake kit, there's corridor sections, there's staircase sections and all that. So when CIG is building out, let's say the Kraken, they don't have to make a wholly new staircase. They just use the staircase that's already built for
Okay.
Drake It's
I
already got the
see.
textures applied. That's why in the PU monthly report, even though the Ironclad is now progressing into gray box, apparently just starting gray box, that's why they've already got images rendered, of inside the ironclad that look pretty good because it's using the kit. Now, the reason CIG still considers that gray box, though, is that there's still a lot of work that has to go into connecting those kits,
Yep.
gluing them together, getting everything set up properly. There's still work there that has to happen. It's not like you just connect them together and you're done. Because if that's how it worked, we would probably have something very similar to like Starfield's build
Yeah.
your own ship
Yeah.
system, but that's not the case here.
Not that click and cut and paste, which is nice, which is
Right.
what we like.
Yeah.
That's why we
Yeah.
that's why we like these spaceships. Um, I want to go back to the concept ship sales you were talking about. There's a
Yeah.
long concept phase. I mean, we're still in the concept phase of stuff like the Merchantmen, so you can't put a time limit on what their concept phase is. But I want to talk about ship sales and their potential after 1.0. A lot of people say if they stop selling ships, they've got to find some way to make money. And we can obviously see
Mm.
ways in which they are making money, squadron, cosmetics, all that stuff. But that comes with the idea that people are assuming they're still going to stop selling ships. Now, I know that was kind of a big topic earlier on in the project, but we all realize there's probably going to be at the very least starter ships still sold with
Yep.
game packages. So my question to you is, do you think that they can get away with doing concept ship sales still after 1.0 and just like make that concept phase like a month or something? Do you think that's unreasonable? Is that going to burn too many people's trust? Is it going to kind of ruin their reputation? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think it will be a problem if it's a large ship, like a really large ship. So maybe like 180 meters and above. So talking like clearly capital and capital plus ships. So these would be ships like Javelin sized ships, battle cruiser sized ships, Bengal sized ships, stuff like that. I think CIG could still go the concept route with those, and even let those ships sit in concept for a year or two, so that players and orgs can still sort of rally around. Do they need it? Do they want to fund it in some way? I think they could get away with that. I don't know if they're going to do that though. I think CIG is going to really limit concepts in general going forward, at least from everything I've heard. And but what I will say is I think ship sales will continue, like flight ready ship sales way past 1.0. It's a thing that, like, whether regardless of your feelings on it as a player, and I know we all have sort of complicated feelings on them selling ships and then selling ships for the price that they sell ships.
Yep.
It does work, and it
Yep.
has been working,
Yep.
and it seems to be working better and better for some reason. And I think because of that alone, there's no one with even an inkling of business sense at CIG that's going to be like, we need to stop that one thing that's bringing in dump trucks of money.
Well, yeah.
So now that doesn't mean they can't do it differently, and I think we will maybe see a change after 1.0 in the cadence of ship sales, but in a post 1.0 world, I could easily see CIG selling 3 to 5 ships a year and continuing that. Um, Now, the argument against not doing ship sales and finding other ways to monetize a game, I mean, I think that's obviously there, and I think there will be microtransactions out the wazoo. But yeah, I don't see ship sales going anywhere personally.
Yeah. I mean, so I asked because obviously they said they don't want to do concept ships, and I think that does speak towards the idea, like you said, a business
Hmm.
person would look at what they're doing and be like, "This is making good money." And I do think that
Yeah,
there's some argument for that when it comes to concept sales. Like we said earlier, it's easy to sell pictures. Doesn't take a lot
yeah,
of money. It makes you quick money. Then you have to pay it back eventually. So there's some level of like wiggle room for them where they're like, okay, either they're trying to look better and be a little
hmm
bit more grown up. We're not selling pictures, or they do not like that period of time where they eventually have to come back to it and make a return and
yeah.
actually build the ship. Um, so
And
I do.
here's the thing. I don't know if they need to do. They could. there's almost a way to do a soft concept sale, and this is a little bit of a weird idea, but that's how I see that's how I see them, doing with ships like the Starlancer build. The Starlancer build was revealed, shown to us, talked about, but they didn't sell it, yet sold variants of the Starlancer build in the form of the
Yeah.
TAC and the Max, which great ships. I think everyone can agree. Sometimes those ships feel a little strange for their role and their size and everything. But in a way, if you look at it, it's almost a soft sale of the Starlancer build concept. You know what I mean? It's like taking a lot of work that probably went into the Starlancer build anyway, making a couple low hanging fruit variants, one being a combat one being a cargo, probably the two most low hanging fruit gameplay loops in terms of just building ships and accessibility.
Yep.
Um, Making those two variants, they sold a lot of them. In a way, you're kind of funding the concept of the build. Um, I don't know if CIG thinks of it that way, but I could see CIG doing concepts like that in the future where, maybe they announce a new concept ship. They're not selling it yet. They don't sell the concept, but they do sell a flight ready variant of it. That may happen. Um,
It's almost like the Zeus
because I think we're
MR.
going to, yeah, and I think we're going to see more of that anyway, just because I think, and I am I want them to do this. I think any ship that's honestly a large ship and above, so think 50 meters and up, they really need to do variants of it or make them modular because you're putting so much work into the ship. Let's say it's 18 months, 2 years of development time. You need to be able to sell that to as many people as possible to make the internal development time worth it, right?
Well,
And
I'll,
so you
I'll
need
let you
to
go.
appeal to a wide player base, I think. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And again, I think there's a lot of ways you could do that: modularity, variants, all that kind of stuff. But um, ships like, let's take the Kraken for example. It is in development, but it's hull limited. It There's a lot of people that own it, yes, but not a lot of people that own it. You know what I mean? And when it comes
Mhm.
out at its crazy price, there's going to be a limited number of people that buy it, but it's also going to be a huge amount of development uplift for CIG.
Right.
So I'm sure they weigh that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, but that's what I think made them special was like people were like they're not weighing that, they're giving me a special unique ship that
That's true.
feels like I have a reason to use it that other people don't. And it
Yeah.
does make the ships feel special, so I would worry like there's this there's this balance and I think this is the same balance a lot of people are seeing in the game right now is like they have pitched a very special game and it will always be niche. It will always not be like a big mass appeal kind of title, but they pitched a very special game. A lot of people feel now they're finding ways to make sure that the investment that they've put into building this game appeals to as many people as possible. And
Hmm.
there's a back and forth, It's becoming too arcadey, it's becoming too easy and handholdy, but at the same time, it's developing into a video game. It needs tutorials and things that teach people
Yeah.
and quality of life and intuitive little design practices that help folks. So I can see how that would fold over into a conversation about ships too, as we get more and more ships and they figure out how to make them make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. I think a lot about Star Citizen is going to sort of be reviewed as they get closer to the 1.0 landscape, right? And well, even before that, post Squadron 42 's released. Let's all just assume it's releasing next year. It may not. Let's assume for a minute. We'll take our hopium pill for a minute. Let's assume that it releases next year. You do have to wonder how that changes and affects Star Citizen's development moving forward, not just in terms of like the pace of creating content, but how they create content. Because I think we're all hoping that Squadron 42 opens this project up to a wider, more mainstream gaming audience. And I think it will to some degree. Um, and when those people come in, what is their appetite going to be like for things like Star Citizen's patch release cadence, concept ships? You brought up concept ships. It's acceptance of concept ships. Hell, it's acceptance of how much a ship costs. Remember, the mainstream gaming audience that's going to come over from Squadron 42's release. they may not be used to a mining starter that comes in at $70. They may think that's insane because that's the
Yeah.
price of an entire game. So it's going to be really interesting to see in a post Squadron 42 world, assuming Squadron 42 releases and is popular, and you get all these people come over. How is CIG going to have to adapt and change to fit a more mainstream gaming audience? Because they've been very fortunate for a long time in that they've had the diehards with them, ride or die,
Yes.
with them on this project. I'm sure you would agree with that. And so I think about that a lot. Like, how will things change um, in
We
all corners of development for the game?
we had an episode, let's say like 4 episodes, 5 episodes ago, maybe. We brought in like Luke Stevens, does a lot of YouTube
Yep.
stuff for like general gaming, and we talked a lot about that. And I think
Yep.
that's kind of a consensus is like we all, especially the people who are playing this game a lot, we all know that there's some pretty cool stuff going on here. They're developing something unique.
Yep.
It's certainly worth at least keeping an eye on if you're into space games. But no matter what they do, the perception always gets ahead of them. And it's not like that stops people from playing the game, but it can slow down. It can definitely hurt their ability to spread after Squadron. But
Yep.
like Squadron 42 could do a lot to help change that. It could prove to people that even if there are $70 concept ships, well, I mean, they are building something pretty cool, and I'd be willing to
Right.
try it out. But yeah, that's a
Yeah.
balance.
And there's some things we just don't have the answers to right now. For example, we'll shift the conversation back to ships. In a world where, let's say, we are post 1.0, let's say a new salvage ship is coming out, right? Or CIG is releasing a new salvage ship, and it does go to flight ready sale. You can buy it with real money. But let's assume in a 1.0 environment that when a new ship comes out, you could also buy it in game with in game credits right away, too. How does that upset the purchase? Or like, how much does that upset the trend that CIG has seen with ship sales like this year, for example? Obviously, it's going
Yeah.
to upset it because people will buy it in game. But even if you think about things like, well, okay, we're going to release it you can buy it now, but we'll release it a month later in the game for credits. I think a lot of people are going to wait that month. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
If that's because so it'll be interesting to just see how the entire monetization structure changes in a 1.0 environment and
Hmm.
what CIG now from just a raising money standpoint, CIG has a lot of places they can exploit fundraising or bringing in money. They really have not leaned into microtransactions as much as will be possible when like base building and crafting is in. I mean, can you imagine what they're going to be able to do? They're going
Yeah.
to sell special plants that you can only get, here and there. They're going to sell
Yeah.
holiday themed items. Every time there's a holiday, the list goes on and on. So, there's sort of three schools of thought, obviously, with the whole fundraising thing. There's the ship selling, there's microtransactions, so paints, blades, all that kind of discussion. And then there is the subscription discussion. All of them have pros and cons. Some of them fit some people better than others. Um, but ultimately, just kind of going back to the beginning of this conversation, I think ship sales, flight ready or concept are I think they're going to be a core part of this game for its existence. I just think concept sales are going to taper way, way off. But I personally don't think we've seen the end of them.
I
I
hope
know
we
they talk about the
have.
battle cruiser, but I think there's going to be more beyond that. I'm not a big fan of them either. Don't get me wrong. Um, I I just don't think we've seen the end of them personally.
Okay. Well, we
I think
we
CIG is
shall.
just going to. I think CIG is going to preserve it for the big ships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I
it may
I don't.
depend on how much money they're bringing in that year. Sorry, go ahead.
I do hope that it's limited in some way. I do also think that they'll sell ships, but I hope that it's
Mhm.
limited in some way. Um,
Yep.
I hope that if they're going to sell a ship, like release it in game at the same time, and just give the people who buy it with money some kind of special skin. No, nothing that's going to
Sure.
change the balance of the actual game, but
Yeah.
like if that's a way that needs to continue to help fund the game, I'd say okay as long as it wasn't a lot. Look at Elite
Yeah.
Dangerous; they're like I think doing two, maybe three ships a year. I think that
Right.
makes
Yeah.
sense. It's like
Yeah.
DLC for a regular game.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I think to going back real quick to the concept thing, I think internally, not to speak for the ship developers, but I think internally, concept ships are problematic for one reason, and that is turnover. I'm in a creative field, and I have artist turnover, and a lot of times we'll have clients come back to us and say, "Hey, you know that project you did for us 3 years ago? We need you to open that back up, make some changes because we've updated some stuff with our product, or we've updated some disclaimer info that we need to update our commercial or whatever we're making." And it is always problematic to open up those old projects. And I think internally at CIG, with their employee turnover, it probably becomes very problematic to concept out a ship, work on all that, put it on ice for 3 years, and then open it back up to go into production. I think what they started realizing is that, oh my God, we got to start over from scratch every time
Yeah.
because that concept stuff is just completely useless at this point. And I think that they just came to a point where concept ships are actually more difficult than just putting a ship directly into production. So ultimately, I think the decision came from that, and especially with John Crew making so many changes to the ship team and the size of it and the scale of it and how they work and how they operate. I think there was a lot of sort of self auditing going on what's the most efficient way to do this. And um, so, yeah, again, I think a lot less concepts moving forward, if any,
Mhm.
in the future. Maybe it's no more at all, and I would be fine with that. And I think the greater Star Citizen community is going to be happy about that.
Yeah, yeah, and the mainstream we keep talking about. Um, well,
Yeah,
speaking of ships and new ships coming out in concept sales, we know that we're
yeah,
not going to have any concept sales at IAE. We didn't have any at CitizenCon, but between CitizenCon and the end of the year, we are seeing potentially 9 different ships being released into the game now. 3 of them already released: the Shiv, the Stinger, and the Paladin. But we still have what looks like 6 other opportunities, possibilities between November and December coming out. So
yeah.
I want to poke your brain a little bit about the new possibilities with basically just like what's the most exciting of everything that you've heard so far that we might see new ship related in the next month or so.
Well, obviously we have sort of the known IAE ships, or at least mostly known, and then there's some big question mark ships. I mean, I think the answer is a little different for the community at large, and then for me personally. For me personally, I'm most excited for the Clipper, the Drake Clipper, which is what we just got the teaser image for the other day.
Right.
And they released a teaser image for it in the monthly report as well. Um, don't know the role of it. Looks to be kind of a medium to large ship. Flies in a unique configuration. I'm a big fan of anything Drake, so I'm excited to see what it is. Um, and but from a community perspective, 100%, it's about the big bad boy. It's the Perseus that's going to be the showstopper,
Right.
and I don't think it's primarily just because it's a big ship. It's one of those ships that checks a lot of boxes for people and gets people excited. It's a big combat brawler, right? It quote unquote punches above its weight. I know that's like the favorite thing of the developers to say,
Yeah.
but this one looks like it probably does. It's RSI. It's a popular manufacturer. It's got a low crew count for its size. It's got big guns, lots of torque. It's just got all those things. It can carry a vehicle. It's got like all those little things that just check off the excitement boxes for people,
Yeah.
and it generates buzz. Anytime a big ship comes off the backlog, it's a backlog ship, so it's another considered another milestone to check off. So it makes sense that Perseus is the ship of the neck. Till the end of the year, that's going to be the big one. If you go back to that funding chart, you'll see that when the Perseus concept sale was unveiled, it was easily one of the most popular concept sales of all time.
That was a IAE release, wasn't it? Or was it Invictus?
Yeah, that's a good question. It may have been Invictus, actually. I forget, but actually, I don't know. Maybe it was IE. I can't remember, but so it makes sense. It's going to be the big one. One interesting thing about the big ships is, and I would put anything, like even ships that are considered more just large ships, like the Hercules Starlifter and Perseus, Polaris, Kraken, Idris, all that, is that even if you don't own those ships, there's a little bit of residual community buzz about it. Like even the people that don't own them get a little excited to see them and know that they're going to be flying around the verse and possibly they'll get to ride on them and stuff. There's always a bit of excitement there. But yeah, for me personally, I'm most excited for the Clipper, the
Yeah,
new Drake ship.
let's talk about the Clipper. So that one is believed, at least to is suspected to be one of the silhouettes from last year's CitizenCon video, right?
Yeah, yeah. Heavily hinted that that's that. The ship's got a lot of nicknames in its time. Flappy Bird is one. It's the ship with the two big vertical Corsair type wings.
Yeah,
You know, I've heard a lot of wild theories from people we both know about what the role of the ship is. Um, I am not allowing myself to get too excited on the role. I actually think it's going to be a pretty simple ship. It's either going to be cargo or combat related, most
yeah,
likely a little bit of both. And for me, this one is just a more where the Corsair is more exploration vehicle carrying focused. This will be the Corsair that's more cargo focused. But it's kind of meant to sort of sit in the same size category as the Corsair. It's not as long, but I think it's going to be in the same size category.
okay,
I think
okay,
from an SCU capability, I think it's going to probably sit somewhere in between. If you look at the cargo capacity of the Corsair and the Cuddy Black to the Caterpillar, there's like a 400 SCU cargo difference between those ships.
yeah.
So I think it's going to sit comfortably in there. It's going to carry somewhere between 250 to 400 or 250 to like 350 SCU cargo, something like that.
Yeah, it's bigger than I was thinking. I was thinking it might fit in between the Corsair and the Cutlass Black, but that would be interesting to see how it might be an alternative to the Corsair.
Yeah, I think the Corsair has been an interesting problem for CIG because I think the Corsair sort of became like the combat go-to ship for a while. We know that they did some nerfs to the guns because of that. And I think originally my thinking for this ship was that this was the answer to that, and that what CIG was doing was giving everybody their heavily gunned Corsair, but they were chopping off things such as the ability to carry a vehicle and all that so that they could better. Sort of like what they did with the Redeemer by releasing the Paladin. The idea behind the Clipper, in my original thinking, was to better position the Corsair, in terms of it
For what
not
it's
being
meant
a
to be.
pure combat dominance ship.
Yeah.
Um,
I
Now I
think
think with us knowing the name that it's the Clipper, I think we could be seeing just a cargo focused Corsair essentially.
I remember our last episode really was where you gave like the first theory of
Mm.
what it would end up being. You were guessing a heavy fighter. It
Yeah.
does, yeah, it lines up.
Uh, and I still think Drake needs a heavy fighter. They don't have one. So that would still honestly make sense. I think the wings present a crazy huge cross section that don't make sense for a heavy fighter. But that theory also kind of is thin when you consider the Corsair is like really good at combat and it's got a huge cross section. So I don't know with Drake if CIG particularly cares about that type of stuff too much. Um, but again, going back to the cargo capabilities, so the Cutlass back has 46 SCU of cargo. The Corsair carries 72 SCU of cargo, and then the Caterpillar's 576. So there's this huge bit of real estate in there that CIG could fill cargo capability wise. And I think that's what the Clipper's going to do. I think the Clipper's not going to have a lot of inside amenities to it. It's just going to have a big hold to carry cargo.
Okay.
I think that's what it's going to do. Yeah.
We shall see.
Yeah. I
So
do not think it's going to be any new gameplay, though. I don't think it's going to be a data runner. I don't think it's going to
yeah, I
be
don't
a
think so
bounty
either.
hunting ship.
No.
It's a gameplay feature thing. I just don't think they're ready for that.
Yeah. So feature wise, this is the little aside, but feature wise, it does seem like they've got their selection of things in the EPTU that they're working on right now: engineering,
Yep.
Vulcan, AI improvements, crafting
Yeah.
is supposed to be coming sometime soon. So like,
Yep.
I don't think they're going to be introducing any types of gameplay with ships
No.
for a little while unless it's obvious.
Yeah, and our good buddy Execute has said something that is true recently. There have been some updates to data running ships in general, the
Mm,
Herald getting the ability for its array to be opened up and stuff like that. And that would make us think, oh, maybe data running's coming. And maybe it is. I don't have any inside knowledge on this, but I don't get too overly excited about that just because we've seen in the past with Dan McCabe, one of the ship developers, that, and he said this publicly before, that sometimes when they just get like a couple of down days, they'll go back to a ship and add something to it just because they can fit it in those 3 days. They did this. They did that with the Carrack. There was no reason to give the Carrack its blast shields right now, but they did it because they had some time to do it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
They may have just done that with the Herald just because. You know what I mean? So I'm not overly reading into that. One other thing I will add about the Clipper, though, and this is for any fellow Drake fans out there, like myself, is that I would expect some more Drake ships over the next 8 months, because with the Ironclad and Kraken in development, they're working on some big Drake ships now. You can bet that there's going to be some smaller Drake ships that just bubble up because of that. We saw that with RSI, as the Perseus and Polaris are in development. What did we get from RSI? Well, we're getting the RSI Salvation. We got the Meteor, we get the Apollos, we're getting the Apollo or the Aurora rework. So there's always a lot of smaller ships from that manufacturer that get worked on when the
Yeah.
bigger ships are being touched. So
Yeah.
expect more Drake ships, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, it's and that kind of leads people to ask the question that's hanging over a lot of folks' head, I think, is like, where's the galaxy? Is that and that's unfortunately is
Yeah.
like, well, Starlancer build anybody?
Yeah. I I and I hate to say that I own a Galaxy, so I say this as someone who does own the ship. I think it's a ways out. I think they are going to pause on RSI for a bit after they get the Perseus out the door. I think they've been pushing hard on RSI. They've got a lot out the door. They ticked off some of the backlog, and I think now they're going to pause on it for a little bit. We still have the Galaxy to come. We still have the Arastra and the Orion. I think those are the only three RSI ships still currently on the table. Um, so I think they're going to pause there. And it's always important too to remember that there's ships we don't know about that are in Squadron 42 from those manufacturers that the ship
Yeah.
team is still responsible and working on. So the Bengal, and then probably the cruisers as well are and the cruiser and the what was it, I forget the other one. There's three like big RSI capitals that are in squadron, and CIG has to maintain those as well, so they might just have RSI fatigue and want to move on to something else for a bit.
I'm open to
Yeah,
that. That's fine. We can do that.
but here's what I'll say to that. Um, and I've been thinking about this a lot with the Ironclad and the Kraken. Before we were always like, there's that old saying that, oh, the longer a ship is in concept, the better, because when they do start making it, it'll be much closer to gold standard, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's true to some degree, but probably a bigger point to be made in regards to that is any ship made after the release of engineering, I think is going to be wholly better for it because engineering is really the beating heart of these spaceships. And when the ship is being developed and can be tested with an active working engineering gameplay loop, I think the ships are going to be much better for it. Like
Oh
even
yeah.
going beyond just like gold standard stuff like light panels and door panels and all that. Having ships, for example, with proper bulkheads built into it for room venting and all that is going to be huge. We've already heard that they're putting that work into the Hammerhead now, but all these future ships, so Galaxy, Arastra, Kraken, Ironclad, I have no doubt they are being built with all of engineering in mind, and I think they're going to be much, much better for it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
classic tale of the claw and the reclaimer, right? Build the ship
yeah,
after the gameplay.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's gonna be. It feels like it could be just a straight up paradigm shift engineering.
Hmm.
Relays
Yeah.
and components actually mattering just changes the entire way we think about ships, at least in terms of combat.
I just jumped in the tech preview build yesterday. Thank you, CIG, for adding me for the Evo. Appreciate that. So check that out. And it was really the first time I got to check it out. And I got to tell you, it is as big as I was hoping it was going to be. And I had a lot of fun just sitting at that engineering. I was on a Paladin, and I just had the funnest time sitting at that engineering console monitoring stuff. There was a fire that broke out on the power plant. I was able to, I got that notification in the engineering terminal. It said there was a critical failure on the power plant. We
Okay.
addressed it. I tell you, it was a fun gameplay loop. It reminded me of the role I play when I play Sea of Thieves, which is I'm that person that when we get hit with a cannonball, I'm the first down there patching up, bailing water. I love that. And
Yeah.
so it was a fun experience. And I think again, these ships that are going to in development post engineering are going to really benefit from it because CIG is going to be able to tap into that gameplay and make really cool stuff around it. For example, um, when they're building out ships now, they can lay out floor plans and stuff to better suit engineering gameplay. They can
Yeah.
place engineering consoles in places that better suit engineering gameplay. And that's going to be huge. It's really going to be huge.
I mean, they didn't even really know that they were going to have. I mean, they knew they would have some kind of a relay system because they had plans for like components throughout ships,
Right.
but they didn't know how they were specifically going to do it up until pretty recently. Like I remember
Hmm.
they were showing
Hmm.
off the Hammerhead when they first started designing engineering, and they had like freaking 30 something relays in the ship. But now when you go
Yeah.
through ships and you, after I'm assuming they did a lot of testing, they also gave us the engineering preview last year and just a lot of internal stuff. You're only seeing a couple of relays on actually some relatively larger ships, maybe like a
Yeah.
mid-sized ship, you'll see like 3 or 4 relays. So they certainly are getting better at figuring out what they want. And I agree with you. Now that they know, building ships is going to be way better at supporting it.
Even little things too. Like there's some ships in the game now that have like the fire extinguishers in the
Mhm.
weirdest locations and not where you would technically want a fire extinguisher. So even like a minor thing like that, I think moving forward, CIG is going to start to figure out like, oh, what are these check boxes we need to hit for engineering with this ship?
Yeah.
And it'll just be much better for it. And I've heard some crazy stuff with engineering too. Like someone was telling me the other day with the ironclad that like because it has its big hold and the command module, someone was like, "Oh man, I'm going to use my ironclad as a mobile impound yard. I'm going to impound people's ships inside the hangar of the ironclad, turn off all the relays to where they can't open the door, and I'll just disconnect my command module and fly off." I was like, "Oh, that is a creative use of the ironclad space and engineering." So it's just going to open up a world where CIG has to consider so much more.
People are going to be running prisons out there, man.
I
It's
know,
going to
I
get
know.
rough. Let's talk more about some of the ships that are coming up. So we hit on the Perseus. We talked about the Clipper,
Yeah,
which is your most favorite. I think the
yeah,
biggest mystery we've seen is actually a ground vehicle,
yeah.
the Grey Cat MDC. Now we've heard of a lot of Grey Cat vehicles over the course of the years, and I want to say at least 2 of them we haven't seen yet. There's the UTV, I think it is. It was like a they showed us a quick
Yeah,
version of that CitizenCon a few years ago.
yeah, UTV or UTG, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also was the no the what the God the base building vehicle they showed at CitizenCon last year, that wasn't Grey Cat, was it?
No, that was the Argo
Argo, ESV.
CSV
Okay,
FM. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So what do you think this could be then?
So the MDC, we got a little bit of a little bit of the information that came about it is that it's and again, this isn't a knock on it, but kind of what we were saying, lowest common denominator. It seems like it's a mobile um ground to air missile platform, essentially a competitor to what we already have with the Cyclone. And I don't think there's any issues with that per se. I would love if CIG would do something different with Gray Cat specifically, though. In terms of like how it employs that. So let's say it is a ground to air missile vehicle. I think it would be cool if Gray Cats was a little different to where you could drive it, park it somewhere, and then turn on automated systems to where it just acts as a ground AI turret for base defense or something.
Okay,
Um,
that's cool.
just something a little bit different. On the MTC, the armory that came out, what was it, Invictus? I One of the things I really think was a missed opportunity was I love that it's sort of like a little mobile armory, but I would have loved if inside the ship you could put something in a suit locker, but that same suit locker had a door on the other side to where people on the outside could access it, so they don't have to get in the ship to grab those things. So I guess what Gray Cat sort of turned out to be is a little bit of just like an alternate to ground vehicles we already have. I
Hmm.
wish that CIG would do Gray Cat a little differently. What I will say is though is that now we heard that the UTG or UGV or whatever it's called is going into development. That was in the Pew monthly report, and we've heard about this MDC for IAE. It does look at the very least like a focus is going back to gray cat, and that's kind of exciting because I would like to see some bigger gray cat ground vehicles, that serve some bigger purposes. Maybe, like you said, we do get a gray cat base builder at some point. That would make a lot of sense. Or maybe we get a gray cat ground miner or something like that. A big one that's like
Yeah.
a much larger scale over the rock or something. So um, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, with all the like kind of crazy ship manufacturer stuff they've been doing lately with grays and other stuff, I would love to see Gray Cat and an existing manufacturer team up. You know what I mean, on a ship. Maybe they bring some of Gray Cat's industrial prowess to a ship that they're making or something. So I think that could be really cool. I don't know.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I do we have any ground vehicles? I think we have maybe one or two that's made for, say, a 3 to 4 person group with a couple SCU of storage.
Yeah, maybe not on the storage front because I know we have the Cyclones that can carry like a box or something, but that's for two people. I think all
Yeah.
the Anvil ballista platforms are like more combat focused, so there's not really dedicated cargo rooms. We don't really have a dedicated ground mass cargo hauler. You know what I mean? Like essentially a semi truck.
Yeah. I feel
Um,
like we need that because these
I do
missions
too.
these missions are sending us into distribution centers, which they've just done a loot rework on them. They just said they updated the loot in those distribution centers to have the new stuff. So
Yep.
people are going to be going in there wanting to pick up stuff. There's plenty of defenses, so you do have to drive in. But then you find like you've got your stuff. Where do you put it when you need to drive back to your ship? I think this would have
Also,
been a great chance for a vehicle like that.
yeah, absolutely. Also, think about a world where we have large bases, large ground bases. CIG showed us that you're going to be able to link freight elevators together, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But even when you pull freight from an elevator, you still need to get it to a ship or maybe to another building or something like that. Or maybe just you want to drive it out because a ship is parked off pad or something. So having the ability to move that cargo, I think, would be pretty great. I didn't think about that with that Anvil Ballista silhouette, honestly, but I'll be honest with you, the most sense would be for that to be
The
a
Atlas.
cargo vehicle.
The Atlas
Yeah.
platform. Yeah.
Yeah, but for cargo, absolutely. I mean, it's a little, I guess it's kind of the boring variant, but it actually, I think, can have a lot of utility.
Yeah, it is boring, and you would think when I asked you that, I'm like sitting here thinking, do we have one? Because you would think we did. It's a very
Yeah,
simple idea, um, and it's
but
crazy
we
because
don't
a
now that
lot
I
of
think about
times
it.
they make vehicles for the way the game is at the moment. You can kind of
Yeah,
tell they realize the way people are playing, so they made a vehicle that fits it. And this is like a really big thing is you
yeah.
can't get across land with your loot.
And I think a vehicle like that would be well suited to have a large tractor beam on it, and a big way to carry cargo, and maybe even like a flatbed version of it. And the reason being is that I'm
Mm,
thinking about in our future large bases. Yes, we'll have the freight elevators, but there may just be situations where you're like, oh, hey, I want to stack cargo, or let's say stack commodities over here out in this field because someone's going to come pick that up later, right? So I'm just going to stash it over here. I've told them it's over here or whatever, and just being able to move that without pulling out a ship, awkwardly, picking up some cargo, flying it over 100 yards, landing, unless
yeah.
just something a little bit more, suited to the distance and the use case. I think.
Yes, I
Yeah.
absolutely agree. But I guess maybe that vehicle is still just chilling wherever uh that hover cargo transport thing that we we
Yeah.
saw for like one
Yeah.
Evocati patch went.
One avocado. Yeah.
All right, on to the next possible ship that we're looking at. The Salvation is really interesting because we saw this one in concept around the same time
Yeah.
as the Wolf,
Hmm.
and I thought it was going to come out with the last patch just because they did the whole salvage update right there. That was kind of came out of nowhere. But it
Hmm.
is popping up a little bit, and people are thinking we might see it at IAE. Tell us a little about what you know about this ship.
Well, we don't know a lot, but I think we can make some pretty good assessments of what this ship is just based off some of the changes CIG's made. We do know it's a small ship. It's meant to be the it's meant to be the salvage version of the Golem, right? It is that super entry level, small, solo, industrial gameplay loop ship. And
Right.
so I think that it will be very small. I think when they separated out the different types of salvage materials, I do think we don't have one that really focuses on that powder. That one of the new salvage sort of uh, you know, clutter scales, if you want to call it that, is they call it powder.
Yeah.
We don't have a ship that taps directly and focuses directly on that. So I think this ship is going to focus on the powder salvage resource, and that it's going to probably be able to hold a lot of SCU of powder for its scale. What it won't be able to do probably is bring in any of that big chunk. Like the SCU won't be compatible with like the big salvage chunks.
Hmm.
I forget what they're called. There's three scales of salvage materials now, but what it will
Was
be able to do
scraps one of
is,
them?
yeah, scraps, powder, and I forget what it is. But I think specifically with powder, it's going to be able to hold a lot of SCU of it. Maybe even like 16 SCU or 24 SCU, however much it is, for its scale to hold a lot of that. I do think outside the Perseus um, and the Clipper, this is the next most guaranteed ship at IAE. And partially the reason for that is that we found the decal files for it.
Oh,
So the decal files are usually something that is like definitely like final art. You're done with the ship. It's being prepped for release. They're going to be putting stuff in the game to represent the ship. So we have the RSI Salvation logo. It's because I didn't like the name, and I was hoping it was a little bit of a troll, but it looks real because I've seen the decal and it's there. So if I had to guess, I think this Salvation is, I would say, 99.8% coming at IAE. Yeah.
okay. And it makes sense too. They clearly want to. They have a little gap in their starting
Yeah.
ship lineup on the
Yeah.
website. You could see they have all the game packages for mining, for combat, for cargo, for
Yeah.
just kind of general purpose. They need one for salvage, and the golem's definitely not it.
Yeah. And
Well,
if you think about it,
sorry, for mining. No, yeah, no,
yeah,
the golem
Golem's
does the
mining.
mining. Yeah,
We don't have that salvaging one. Yeah. And if you think about it too, it would make a lot of sense to have this ship for IAE because RSI is the first manufacturer day. We're going to have the Perseus, yes, but that's going to be a $750 ship. That's not going to be available to everybody. So you're going to have a certain type of people that can buy a new ship on the first day. Wouldn't it be great to have a very low cost entry level ship available that day too, to where you're really hitting both sides of that market, the
yep,
pricey, expensive market, and then people just coming into the game. So it's a great way to kick off IAE. It's 100% why I think we're going to see that ship on day
yeah,
one.
yeah. And I'm hopeful that it does do some work, as you said, of setting the scale for salvaging. It would be very
Yeah.
cool if they they decided that salvaging for powder is profitable at certain scales, and if you do certain strategies, but generally it is reserved for smaller scale jobs and like the more maybe it's like the equivalent of
Yeah.
RMC before, because RMC was you get less, but it would cost more, right?
Right. Oh,
So
and those material tiers are powder, scraps, and chunks. I just
and
looked it up.
chunks. Okay.
So I think this one will focus on on that powder, which is labeled as the highest density but lowest yield and has the fastest refining time. I
Okay.
think that's what this ship will focus on.
Yeah, yeah. I like that because then it can set a sort of a goal for people to be like, well, someday I'm going to be
Yeah.
ripping ships apart, and if they can get the fracturing right, if they can use Maelstrom to actually make fracturing interesting rather than just pressing a button, in it,
Yeah.
and the piece
Yeah.
explodes. Do you think this is going to have an interior, this ship, or will it be like the Golem, where it's just bare minimum?
I think it's going to be bare minimum. I do. Yeah, I think it's going to be bare minimum. There could be an entryway into the ship, like that takes you into a small sort of like foyer area, for lack of a better word, that's
Hmm.
very small, and then it maybe has like one suit locker in it, and then you go into the cockpit. But I don't think there's going to have any sort of real interior based off some of the stuff that was found for the ship. So a lighting setup was found for the ship, and to explain why that's found sometimes when the geometry is not in the ship is that lighting is one of the downstream things. The lighting effects is one of the things that downstream team touches, and it's possible the lighting setup for the ship is put into the game files before the actual geometry of the ship is in the game files.
Hmm.
So that's sort of why we're seeing it, and based off that, it looks to be the scale of like the Anvil Pisces. It's really small.
Okay. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. And
the
it looked a
Pisces
lot
has
like
an
the Pisces.
interior. Yeah, and the Pisces has an interior, so it's still possible, but they've also got to have an account for places to store all the powder or SCU of salvage. So I
Yep.
think that's what it's going to be more dedicated to. So probably just be a cockpit.
Okay. Next up, we've got the Apollo variant that everybody's been waiting for. They've been
Mm.
kind of teasing, talking about a favorite getting a variant added to it. What is your take on why they're making an Apollo variant now after all this time?
I think this follows the logic with the Valkyrie. It follows the logic with the Prowler. It is where they've come up with a really cool ship design that a lot of people like, and it ties into a very niche gameplay role, and they're like, darn, that was a mistake. We need to make the general purpose version of that hull to sell to more people. um, the Valkyrie, everyone loves the Valkyrie. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say they don't like the look of the Valkyrie. So what they do, they made the Asgard, right, which has been one of my favorite ships the past 12 months. With the Prowler, another cool ship. Everyone loves the look of the Prowler. But again, not everyone needs a drop ship. So what they make, the Prowler utility. I think this is the same thing with the Apollo. It's the Apollo, really cool, beautiful looking hull. It's only tying into medical gameplay, so let's make the general purpose gameplay version of it. And that's what I think the Hermes is. I think it's going to be a cargo runner.
So, how do you feel about that? How does like does it feel like they're just kind of making up for a mistake they made? Should they stick to their guns and have these ships be unique? Because I mentioned earlier, like
Yeah.
when you start making ships just because you know that they'll appeal to a lot of people, they lose their specialness in some way.
Yeah, it's to me, it's a great point, and I fully agree with you on that. And I do want ships to be special. I don't want there, for example, to be 8 versions of the Kraken. You know what I mean? But I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword too, where obviously there's the monetization part of it, right? Where it's
Hmm.
like, okay, we could further monetize the Apollo. Like if they were making the Apollo now, I don't think they do 2 medical variants. It'd just been one version of the
Yeah,
ship that you could put the modules in. And then the other one would have been the variant. But regardless, put the monetization stuff aside too. I also think it becomes problematic for CIG when it comes to keeping ships up to date. You know what I mean? It's like, oh man, we got this Apollo or the Prowler. How much prioritization should we be to making that ship gold standard if it's only owned by 500 people because it ties into such a niche gameplay loop? So I think there's some degree of like we need to make the ship more general purpose so it's worth us going back to dealing with. Um, I'm not saying that's a good excuse for losing the specialness because I do agree. I think it is really cool when you do fly up on a ship that you don't see in the verse that much. I think that's a really cool moment. I've long said that one of the coolest moments I ever had was in Star Citizen. This was quite a few years back at this point, but I was flying around. I had never seen a Starfarer in game, and I came up to this outpost, and there was a giant Starfarer landed on the pad, and I just was in my ship, and I just like orbited around it for a minute, checked it out. I got out, and I was walking around it, and the pilot was out there and he said, "Do you want to look inside?" And I got, you know what I mean? It was just a cool moment because you don't see
yeah.
starfarers all the time, and it was just neat. And I don't want to lose that. Um, but at the same time, I think there's a monetization issue and a gold standard or upkeep issue that CIG has to contend with these ships. Um, so I know a lot of people think the Hermes is going to do some crazy new gameplay thing, but no, I think it's following the standard of we need the general purpose ship to the niche ship.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah. Starting
what I
with the
would
go ahead.
I guess I would say that the Asgard is probably the most, or is probably the best example of tackling it though, where they made enough changes to the Asgard where it still kind of feels like its own ship, and that it's not intruding too heavily on the Valkyrie. I mean, there's a lot of commonality between the two, but there's also a lot of differences between the exteriors of those ships. So I personally hope that the Hermes does have some significant exterior changes, like maybe different engines. There's just something to pull it away from the Apollo. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly feels a lot like there are too many ships when you consider the idea that like we have ships that are special, but they're not quite worth getting because they're just not useful for enough people. So instead, they have to then
Yeah.
make another ship that makes sense for
Well,
that chassis. And
let me give you another great example of this. The Saber Raven. You
yeah,
know, every super rare ship still is a super rare ship. CIG kind of knew they needed to gold standard that ship at some point. It was getting pretty old. It had some issues. But what happened? Well, we got the Firebird, we got the Peregrine. They needed those variants to make it worth their while.
yeah,
Because think about it, we really didn't need the Firebird or Peregrine.
no,
You know what I mean? We
everybody knew.
didn't
Why would we need
technically
a
need
race
those.
ship that size?
Right. We didn't technically need that. But it just it came down to like a sort of economy of scales in terms of like making it worth it for them to update and upkeep them.
I think that's the
Um,
frustrating part. Is
yeah,
it's something that I think almost anybody who was really into this back in like the 2018 period of time was watching the concept ships come out, was watching the sales
yeah,
that they were making, and was like, wow, this is a company that really feels like they can support special ships. And like, that's what makes
yeah,
this special is like, they're not going with the whole, we got generic shapes you can connect together like Starfield or No Man's Sky, and you could just make any ship out there. This is a game that has like very bespoke designs that all are super unique and purpose built and
hmm
made, and they'll be supported. And now here we are, 7 years later, and I guess CIG has come to the realization that they can't do that. But a lot of players were kind of, we were like, oh, this is a cool way to do it. And I think that's still true. I'm not
yeah,
saying they've lost that, but it certainly is revealing um how how obvious I think what you're saying the strategy is, which is like making sure that ships that are not that popular become more popular just out of support so that they
yeah.
can justify supporting it further.
I think we're seeing this in other ways too, though. Just going back to the monetization front, I think this is a big reason why we will continue to see kits for capital ships. So we got that with the Idris, with the K kit, which was always promised, but really the K kit was nothing. Originally the K kit was meant just to arm the P version. It wasn't necessarily like a wildly new ship, but they decided to come out with the T kit as well. And again, because they had to further monetize this $2,000 beast, right? They need to further monetize it in ways that people could spend money on it past the $2,000, right? So that's kind of another way it makes it worth it for them, right?
Yeah, to
Because
keep working on it.
it gives people who drop that big $2,000 pledge for the Idris, it gives them further monetization, opportunities with that player for that ship. So I think it's not going to shock me at all if we don't see something kit wise come to the Perseus. I 100% think the Kraken is going to get some sort of kit, and it might be minor stuff. It might just change the size 8 nose gun to a size 10 missile turret, whatever the case may be. They want it's the same thing when you're in the grocery store and when you get up to the cash register, they got all the candy, gum, sodas, and magazines up there because they want to get those type of purchases on while you're heading out the door. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Those
your
impulse
impulse.
purchases,
Yeah.
and so that's what we're seeing here is that monetization across the board. And and it takes many forms. It takes the forms of kits, but it also takes the form of generalized variants, all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm. Oh man, we got a lot of ships, man, and I do
yeah,
think that
yeah,
this whole variant thing, especially like the way that they're doing it, is it's interesting. Gonna keep a close eye on that.
yeah. Yeah, and another one that we've heard some rumors about is another wolf variant, an L22
Yes.
um, alpha or alpha wolf or something. We'll see what that is. I really hope it is not what they did with the Guardian. Usually, I am okay with variants. I didn't love the Guardian MX only because I thought the Guardian MX was pretty much just a better version of the Guardian. Like it didn't do anything new or different. It just was sort of a better version all around, which if you purchase the original Guardian, just sort of makes you feel crappy. I hope that the L22 Wolf, Alpha Wolf is not just a better version of the Wolf. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
I do own the Wolf. I like it. And if the Alpha Wolf is just a better version with bigger guns or is faster or whatever, that's going to not feel too great. I do think when they make these variants, they need to make them, going back to what you said, they need to make the variants kind of special too and try not to have a lot of overlap between variants. I think that's problematic.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
think that it would make more sense if the wolf just got a kit? Why would they make
Yes.
a different ship?
Yeah, I think it needs to be a kit. 100% needs to be a kit. And not even necessarily a kit. Well, I guess you'd call it a kit because it would be a bespoke weapon switch out. But yeah, it would just be a switch out for the bespoke weapons. The problematic thing there is I don't know if community reaction has been super positive to the kits. And sometimes I start to wonder if CIG goes, "Oh, okay, well, that doesn't go over very well. Let's just make a new variant." You know what I mean? And it's still technically a kit. We're just going to sell you the whole ship again. It'll be interesting to see what
Yeah.
they do with that. I actually thought we were going to get a kit for the Polaris, and we haven't seen that yet. But the more I think about it, the Polaris may not be suited for it. But the Perseus is. So the Perseus could be a big kind of sign in the road for us when it releases at IAE and seeing how CIG monetizes it. It may tell us about the path they're going to go forward with over the next year to further monetize these ships. Which again, I'm not saying further monetization is a bad thing or that's not a criticism. It's just looking at kind of what they're doing and trying to figure out if there's a strategy behind it or if it's really just sort of random and there was an opportunity available to do it.
I kind of hope they back off this strategy a little bit and
Yeah.
slow it down and get back to doing stuff that stands out a little bit more. I'm glad that they
Yeah.
are definitely releasing ships clearly based on the gameplay actually available, and hopefully that means we're going to start seeing more industrial stuff soon. But I do
Mhm.
think it's a very slippery slope that they're on, and they're not at the top of it. They're already part way down it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree with you about that at all. The whole idea, for example, and they hinted heavily during the ship showdown Q&A, live Q&A, that they were going to have switch out or flexibility in the bespoke weapons. But to me, that sort of like takes it into a place. Well, it's like, well, why is it bespoke at all then if you can switch them out? You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Just takes it into kind of a weird place where you almost can tell CIG sort of figuring it out. They haven't. It's almost like they don't totally have a plan for it, and maybe it's being dictated a little bit based off what's selling, which would make sense. But
very sounds like CIG,
yeah, it's a weird one though. I just think they need to make bespoke weapons bespoke, and bespoke weapons should maybe just have a little bit extra than a modular weapon. Um, I think that was originally the plan, but it does sort of look like now they may be moving towards a world where we're switching bespoke weapons in and out. So,
which is
yeah,
it's just a
I'm
weird thing to
speculating,
say.
but it seems to be heading that direction.
You mentioned 2026. What are
Yeah.
your predictions for 2026 ship releases? Anything? I mean, obviously there's the big one, but is there anything else in particular you think we will see next year?
Well, I think that the next big near-term ship for 2026 that's going to take a lot of the air out of the room will be the ironclads, the ironclad and ironclad assault. And I think what we're going to see there is I think we're going to see Drake Defense Con, or not Drake Defense, just Defense Con be a much bigger thing next year. CIG even hinted towards that at last Defense Con when they canceled Defense Con and they said we'll be back bigger and better than ever next year. I think next year's Defense Con is going to change a little bit to where it's a much bigger event, maybe even lasting the same amount of time that Invictus, um, takes place. But DefenseCon will be a bigger event, and I think there's going to be other manufacturers there beyond just Drake. I think we're going to see Gray's Market there. I think we're going to see sort of the manufacturers that the UEE doesn't have contracts with will all be at DefenseCon, and the Ironclads will be the big bad boy on the stage for that. Um, Beyond that, though, beyond that, in terms of big important ships, it's a question mark because I'm doubtful that the Kraken could get done by next IAE. That may be a stretch. Um, yes, they have the Drake kit, but there are some unique things going on in the Kraken that they really haven't done in a PU ship yet.
Yep,
Things such as a landable deck that really needs to have gravity control on it. The air car. There's some stuff to figure out there. The Dragonfly Bay, which has got kind of a unique elevator system on it that they would have to make sure works right. So I think that could be a little further out. Consolidated Outland Pioneer is still multiple years away. I've said many times that ship has a lot of dependencies, so that one's pretty far out. What we could possibly see, though, is we could possibly see something like the Liberator make kind of a big push next year. Um, it still would be tight for them to get it done by IAE next year. It is a big ship. It's 126 meters long or something like that, but that's possible. I think right now, though, the only definite is the Ironclad and the Ironclad Assault.
I agree.
Yep.
It does seem like the Liberator could prove as a testing ground, though, for the ships landing on ships for the Kraken.
Yeah. Yeah, it could. It could. And what has become evident with the Asgard, the Paladin, I was just in the Paladin the other day and the tech preview and stuff, is that CIG is definitely landed on an internal kit for Anvil military ships. You know what I mean? Like wall panels, corridor panels, floor
Yeah.
panels, light switches, all that kind of stuff, greeble stuff inside. That you can tell they've really started to work it out and refined it for the Paladin. I think the Paladin definitely a high watermark for CIG for ship aesthetics,
I love the
especially for the
interior.
Anvil line. Yeah, especially for the Anvil line. So if you look at the cross section of the Liberator, and I have my issues with the Liberator, but if you look at the cross section of the Liberator, it's really just a big Paladin or Asgard. Like the actual wall designs and how the ship looks on the inside, it looks just like the inside of the Paladin or something, just scaled way up. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So I think they could borrow heavily from that kit and make it happen. It just depends on what's going to generate the most buzz. Again, I would like for it to be the Kraken next IAE. I just think it's a tall order. I spoke with someone who talked directly with one of the ship team members who was apparently working on the Kraken, and that developer was at one of the big Bar Citizen events for CitizenCon Direct, and essentially said that they had just really started the Kraken development like 2 weeks beforehand, and that they were still figuring out a lot about where certain rooms were even going to be and stuff. So I still think that ship has a ways to go.
Yeah, it's definitely not next year.
Yeah.
It's
No.
likely DefenseCon 27.
Yeah. Yeah. I could see that being a lot more realistic. And here's the thing, too. I mean, I don't necessarily want them to rush through those big ships. People paid a lot of money for them. Take your time. Well, take your time within reason, but get them right. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Don't just rush them out because you're trying to hit IAE or something. People paid too much money for those ships for there to be, mistakes. So,
hmm Um, a lot of people are pulling a a single word and making a fuss about possibilities of ships next year. I think it's a very bad idea. But
mhm.
somebody, I don't remember who, somebody said at the end of one of their talks recently, and maybe at CitizenCon, that the ship, I think John Cruz said it, that the ship situation next year was going to be expansive. Uh,
Mhm.
People have taken this as a possible teaser that we might see the expanse. It might not be the Expanse. Personally, I think if they're going to bring in a refinery ship, it'll be something we don't know about yet. Um,
Yeah.
but do you think that we might see a turn towards industrial game? Like, we both know that they've been making ships based on the gameplay that's on focus, and Nyx is probably going to bring some more focus to industrial. We know mining's getting updates and all that kind of stuff, new commodities,
Yeah.
interstellar trade routes. It's happening in a very slow way. Do you
Yeah.
think that we might actually start be seeing more of a push towards those kinds of ships than just combat all the time?
I'm a little split. I'm an industrial player, so I want to say yes. I want to say that is the case. And while I do agree that Nyx has a lot of industrial focus, Nyx has also got a hell of a lot of combat focus. If you think about two specific
Yeah.
things, Vandal raids, okay, which is going to be a big deal. People are going to want to get out and fight those Vandal, and then these big fleet tactical operation things,
Mhm.
which also take place in Nyx. They're instanced, but they're within Nyx. So Nyx is also pretty combat focused when you think about it, and I hope we see a return to industrial ships. I would like for us to get the large salvager, the one that sits between the Vulture and the Reclaimer. I would like to see the Arastra come online. Um, the Expanse is honestly a perfect ship to come into the verse. I actually thought it was going to come in this year,
Same.
but we ship-based refinery gameplay we need to have in the game. I know the Galaxy has a module for it, but the Expanse is really the best test bed for it.
Please.
Um, yeah, yeah.
I'm
So
sorry. It's just that bugs me because it was on the monthly reports like years ago, refining.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, CIG's argument, I guess, is that we do have refining in game, but we don't have ship-based refining. And the argument can be made that if you go back to the base building presentation at CitizenCon, something always stuck out to me that CIG said, and not to tangent for a minute, but it does relate back to ship-based refining. And that was, and you may remember this, but they made changes to the Starlancer build, and they came up with the entire concept behind the CSV FM, the Argo-based building vehicle. The whole reason those came about was because they wanted ships that could go to a location and build at least 1 to 2 structures without having to return back to a landing zone to pick up more supplies. So they wanted those vehicles to either A, be able to carry enough material with them to build the base in one go, or like 1 or 2 buildings, or B, in the case of the CSVFM, they wanted it small enough that something like a cuddy could take it to location to build. You know what I mean? Where you're not like having to take multiple big ships to bring your base building armada to a location.
Yeah.
But if you're building a base, one of the things, essentially what you're doing with base building is crafting, right? You're crafting buildings. What is one of the key core gameplay loop features of crafting? It's refining gameplay, right? Because that's how we get the quality of materials we're building with. So for me, if CIG is trying to stick with this thing where when we're building a base we can go to the location and not have to leave right away, then absolutely you need on-site refinery. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? You need an on-site ship-based refinery. Yeah. Oh, hey, watch. So you need a ship-based refinery that you can take to those locations and do that work with. So for me, I do think ship-based refining is coming, and probably I would hope coming next year, so that it does tie in and sync up well with crafting and base building. Um, on the flip side, though, you could make arguments for new types of combat ships in
Ugh, yeah.
Nyx as well. So let me play devil's advocate there for a minute. With the Vandal raids, for example, just with my thinking on combat, I don't think CIG is thinking this, by the way, but with Vandal raids, that could be a perfect place to test Nautilus mine lane fields. You know what I mean? Where you're doing. I mean, so there's a lot of arguments to be made for new combat, even new combat gameplay, such as mine lane in Nyx.
Yeah.
Also, being that it's such a big system and not overly crowded, it could be a good test bed for it. Of course, I said the same thing with Pyro. I said, "Oh, Pyro is the perfect place to test minefields." You know, so I'm a little up in the air about it. I do hope we get more industrial ships though in 2026. I hope there's a focus there.
So do I. All
Yeah.
right, man. To wrap.
I will say one last thing on that before we go though,
Mhm.
that if there are going to be industrial slash commercial ships focused on. I'm actually thinking more that we'll see commercial freighter ships focused on even over industrial ships. And that's partially because we've heard of these new intersystem or system to system cargo missions and all these new cargo hangars with the new cargo elevators coming into game that really just service the whole sea at this point.
Yeah.
I could see some big cargo ships coming into the game, possibly that consolidated Outland cargo ship we've seen in Squadron. Who knows? But maybe that's what we'll see first is more cargo related stuff. So
I
anyway,
I hope
rant over.
so, because maybe that would mean they're going to be focusing on cargo and making it more deep as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Before we go, I need to get a prediction from you. Every guest is going to have their mid to long term prediction on here that we return to next time
Sure.
you're on the show. So I want to get something, a hot take from you, something you may or may not expect in the next, say, 6 or so months in the game. What are you thinking? It can be anything related to. It
Um,
doesn't have to be spaceships.
I would say probably the big prediction would be I think we're going to see crafting land in the game bigger than maybe we even thought. I think the initial test experiment will be FPS type stuff, but I actually think crafting is going to come into the game sooner rather than later, and we're going to be able to start crafting small components and stuff like that.
Right. I hope you're right about that one. I like that. I'm
Yeah,
excited for crafting. It was never really anything I focused on in games normally, but it looks like a
yeah.
really fun thing to do in an MMO.
Just seeing all the stuff that's come even into the content driven stuff we've gotten this year, where like some of the Onyx facilities have crafting stations in them and stuff now, it seems like CIG is really pushing that direction. So I think we're going to see that for the first half of next year. It's going to be there's going to be a focus on crafting, and with crafting and resource management both coming into the game, resource management being engineering, that really does set the stage for base building. I don't think base building's first part of this year. Maybe we'll
Yeah.
get a tier 0 at the end of next year, but we do need those prerequisites for base building. So we
Yeah.
got to get crafting out. We do need to get resource management out because all that ties into it. So that's my prediction is crafting is going to be a focus.
All right, man. I like that one. Well, we will meet back up about that in 2026. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much for closing this year out with me on the ships, dude. This
Yeah,
is
buddy. Thanks for having me on here. I always love talking ships with you.
hell yeah. Can you give people one last chance again to know where they can find your own talk show and your fleet viewer especially?
Yeah, you can go to starjumpfleetviewer.com and use that tool. There's hanger.link as well that can check out your hangars. Obviously on YouTube and Twitch, I'm starjump_grim. Find me on there. If you go to either one of those or our X, which is my X account, which is starjump.org, you will find links to the Perseus giveaway that I'm doing right now. Make sure you sign up for that. It's free. Multiple ways to enter. Get in on that. I'm going to give that away on December 2nd. So the day before the last day of IAE. So someone will be the proud new owner of a Perseus. So get in on that, and I'm just going to keep making content. We do have a lot of big plans, and are currently in discussions on Fleet Viewer 2. So yeah, exciting stuff.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks
Yeah, man,
again for joining me for this one, and thank you everybody for listening.
appreciate it.
Hope you enjoy spaceships. I'm guessing if you're still listening, then you probably do. Thanks for listening till the end. If you enjoy this podcast and you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast or any of the audio platforms, please consider leaving a review. Let the folks know. Star Citizen Podcasts, we are a thing, and you can learn a lot about the game if you jump into them. Also, though, you guys can join on YouTube. Check it out. Main channel, gameplay channel has just been starting to add some more content. So if you want to get more of a look at what we're actually talking about, now I'm actually playing the game more, guys. Yay!
Hey,
It happens.
PIG gotcha.
Yeah, when the game becomes more playable, you actually start
That's right.
playing more.
That's right.
So thank you again, everybody, for coming. Thank you, supporters, for making this possible and joining us in the live show here, chatting on the side. I hope you all have enjoyed this one, and I will see you next week.